As the Pokemon audience ages, so do taste and a desire for change. Fans have long yearned for an open-world Pokemon game.
Ask any gamer to talk about their ultimate fantasy
My
video
dream
games,
Pokemon game and why it'll probably never happen.
Open-world
Nintendo
Pokemon
is
games.
eternally circling the
Where's
one
the 3D
Pokemon game
RPG?
everyone
Witcher 3 is all
actually
we want.
This is what you wanted, right?
Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl were a mistake. A mistake that was immediately followed up a mere 70 days later with Pokémon Legends Arceus, a game that would quickly go on to become the second most successful entry in the franchise, selling over 6.5 million copies in a single week. I'm sorry, what? Like, I get it, it's Pokemon, but it's just so crazy how quickly the whole community moved away from BDSP for Arceus. I mean, it doesn't even feel like the Gen 4 remakes came out at all. Wait, you're telling me they sold over 6 million in their first week too?
You can't keep getting away with it!
BDSP's myriad of failures were so monumentally awful that the entire game felt like a 20-hour-long non-stop feels bad man moment. Obviously, the sales did not reflect this, but no one,
It better be fucking no one,
thought these games did the series, and especially the original games, any justice. I said as much in our review of the Gen 4 remakes, and that clearly struck a chord with a lot of you. Thanks, by the way. Pokemon hit a new low. The formula had never felt so stagnant, passionless, and fed up with itself. I too was fed up and about ready to call it quits with the franchise. It had been a good 25 years, this thing that had nurtured me all throughout my life and millions others. Clearly, the stewards of the thing no longer gave a single shit about the quality anymore. Too many disappointments and bad blood made the series and the community at whole an unpleasant place to be. I do think the Pokemon Company at large is responsible for this reality. Everyone likes to point out how toxic the fan base is, and you know, they're right. But treating Pokemon like a monolithic entity that no one, not even the company themselves, has any control over is obviously a major problem for everyone involved. We constantly hear the excuses online of how tight global merchandising multimedia release schedules force games to come out no matter the state they're in. And I'm sure this is true, it just doesn't have to be. Pokemon the video game could take a year off and still remain highly successful and in the public consciousness with its many other verticals like the anime and trading card game. The fact that it doesn't, and let's be honest, just to please shareholders, has caused every new game to spiral lower and lower in quality, with Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl being the most recent example. It's embarrassing. This isn't the Titanic. You don't have to sail headlong into an iceberg. And you certainly don't have to annualize it. Sitting here now, the reality of Pokemon being this unstoppable cruise liner of consumerism has in no way improved. But I come here to say that Pokemon Legends Arceus seems to have prevented at least a total capsizing for now, giving me the faintest of hope that Pokemon can bounce back despite itself, thanks to creative leads at Game Freak demonstrating a willingness to adapt around their circumstances and try something new. Alright, look, is Pokemon Legends Arceus an incredible game? No. I mean, look at it. But that's not to say that there isn't any fun to be found here. I mean, it's Pokemon, in an honest-to-goodness open world. How could it not be at least a little entertaining? Game Freak did what many fans have begged for years. They put their iconic creatures in an open-world action game. Now, of course, I got a lot to say about this. I mean, clearly, as for a good portion of those years, I was against this potential open-world turn. The mechanical roots of Pokemon are deeply entrenched in classic JRPG genre traditions, a steadfast formula that Pokemon has relied on for over 25 years. The exact systems that make for such highly replayable games we have today are endemic to the genre that spawned it. Why would you throw out the true goldmine that lies at the center of the Pokemon concept? I was the heretic though, wishing to just return to the good old days of Gen 5, back when the formula was so refined it began to rival the actual all-time classics in its genre. I'm serious guys, Pokemon Black and White are like, no joke, at least a 9. In order to understand Pokemon Legends Arceus on a deeper level, we need to take a minute and account for the emotional baggage that Pokemon fans have accrued over the last 12 years. And I promise I will actually review the game proper, but before we get there, we have a great marsh-sized swamp of context that needs wading through, so buckle up. Pokemon fans have had a storied history of being dissatisfied with the series' genre. As genre trends evolved in the West, there has always been a dissenting sect of the fanbase looking for Pokemon to adopt and evolve the gameplay to that of other AAA franchises. When I was a kid, the odd thing to imagine was a Pokemon game in the style of World of Warcraft during the height of its popularity in the late 2000s. However, the second and more relevant era of Pokemon e-begging can be traced to around the time of the series' evolution with 3D graphics with Pokemon X and Y. True dissatisfaction with the series' stagnation had set in. X and Y's release in late 2013 orbited around a home console space that began experiencing wide-scale innovations in broadly appealing open-world design, with Skyrim releasing in late 2011, Far Cry 3 in late 2012, and GTA 5 releasing just a month prior to X and Y. All the while, Pokemon continued to be developed for a 3DS that struggled to keep up with the series' meagerly evolving graphics, as well as a development team that struggled to keep up with newer technological demands in the face of stricter, now global release deadlines. This resulted in many of the 3DS Pokemon titles having poor frame rates, restrained hallway level design, less ambitious narratives, and an overall lack of detail, features, and just be honest, plain genuine personality. I'm sure we're all aware of the discontent generated online about this pattern. There was already a boiling desire to get a true mainline series game on home consoles ever since the GameCube days, with many fans wanting Game Freak to pull the plug on series handheld exclusivity and spread its wings on more powerful hardware, especially when, in 2017, The Legend of Zelda completely reinvented itself with Breath of the Wild, and the release of Super Mario Odyssey returned the series back to its sandbox roots. It made Game Freak's effort in pushing out Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon on the rapidly dying 3DS look tone-deaf in comparison. Peeps were horny for Pokemon's quote-unquote Breath of the Wild treatment. But when the time came for Pokemon to make the switch to the Switch, broad-scale innovation did not come with it immediately. The tiniest of stepping stones were laid, first with Pokemon Let's Go, a stripped-back reimagining of Red and Blue, shaped to resemble the experience of Pokemon Go. The game's alright at best, but the feature that excited everyone at the time was how Pokemon visually spawned on the overworld itself. Now, once you got into battle, the excitement waned as you frustratingly flailed your ever-drifting Joy-Cons at the screen. Personally, I saw this development as a short-sighted, surface-level measure that further undermined the formula I once loved. The sacrifice to system depth in Let's Go was criminal. It'd take me an hour to list off all the mechanics removed from the game to make this work. But hey, catching Pokemon no longer required you to shuffle through tall grass for random encounters, and for some, that was enough. Look, I know waltzing through tall grass isn't the most fun experience in the world, but is this really much better? However, the anti-random encounter crowd are clearly willing to throw this mechanic out for any fresh idea that somewhat neared the open world dream they had laid out in their heads. But for 2018 Sam, he was not so impressed, and was also depressed. Then we have Sword and Shield, which I've still yet to play, and if you've been following the narrative of this video, I doubt that's too surprising. But thankfully, Turnstyle co-writer Tom has played it and has endorsed my suspicion that the game, isn't very good. The wild area, marketed as this open-world playground for Pokemon, was pretty disappointing. Game Freak, clearly feeling the pressure to implement more freedom into the mainline series, decided to cordon off a part of the world to experiment with open-world design. Sword and Shield's measured take on open-world Pokemon gave me no confidence in their ability to live up to any bar you threw at them. They just limbo under every single one. Something as complex and radical as a fully open-world Pokemon game seemed impossible when they were struggling to just make a good three-dimensional JRPG after 5 at-bats. You really gotta place yourself there, back in 2021, with all this potential swirling in your head, and the community affixed to the big 25th anniversary Pokemon Presents. We get treated to this sopping wet nostalgia advert, taking us through a lifetime of our warmest childhood memories with the franchise. However, all that nostalgia would soon disintegrate like a vampire in the sun when the long-awaited Gen 4 remakes were finally revealed after years of hype and speculation. And they looked like this, as antiquated, unambitious, and cheap as could possibly look. Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, the Gen 4 remix, my guy! Outsourced hastily to a third-party developer. This was the moment to finally take that big leap, considering especially how beloved and iconic the Sinnoh region is. Instead, they go for this extremely deflating, faithful remake. Yet, before ending what would have been a disastrous direct, we got a little taste of what Game Freak proper was working on. Now that we've synthesized our historical gamer context to Pokémon Legends Arceus, it's finally time to get into the details. As I alluded to earlier, Legends is shockingly not a total failure of a video game. So what exactly makes this open-world Pokémon game work? 2 words, chucking balls! The primary action input of Pokémon Legends Arceus is throwing. Whether it be a Pokéball to catch a Pokemon or a Pokéball to use your own Pokemon, every critter, crystal, plant, or tree keeps your fingers and mind glued to your balls as you move from point A to point B. Chucking balls balls is as easy as breathing in Legends, and that really is why this shit works so well. The fact that my guy can just seamlessly run and toss balls leads to a fun, rhythmic combo string of chores. You can empty your whole party, tasking each one of them with a specific command, all while catching any poor sap that enters the frame. Decimating the environment behind you without ever looking back is hardcore satisfying. The chorus of chimes and jingles that trail your character transform menial activities from being frustrating or monotonous into something actually fun. It's the same as slashing through hordes of enemies in a Dynasty Warriors game. There's a thoughtless ease that is both addicting and meditative. Therefore, just like there needs to be a million enemies on screen in a Musou game, there needs to be a world chock full of stuff to collect. It really doesn't matter what stuff. If I can toss a ball at it, it's stuff worth having. A decent job is done making the stuff feel diegetic and motivated by the environment, but don't get me wrong, these collectibles are still lame. 98% of the time, it's shit like tumblestones, berries, and other crafting resources. Crafting can really suck the life out of a game if it's poorly implemented, but here it's just hyper underutilized. Basically, all you do is craft the same ever-improving ball types over and over, but nevertheless, nothing, save for that damn limited inventory, disincentivizes you from performing ceaseless aerial assaults with your spherical arsenal at the entirety of the natural world. The creatures that populate the world of Hisui are the primary subject and object of all this hurling, which leads to the game's most obvious success in the open world format. And that, of course, is that there's a lot of fucking Pokemon in it. That is to say, the open world game has an impressively large monster variety. Legends has over 240 unique Pokemon roaming throughout Hisui. Its large roster is clearly made possible by the lack of almost any complex AI or combat mechanics outside of a dodge roll to worry about. Legends' iconic mobs exhibit a large and diverse set of designs and abilities. It's funny saying it this way. Clearly, these aren't just any designs, they're fucking Pokemon. When exploring a game and said game has you running into a Psyduck, a fucking Psyduck, yeah, that's gonna be an interesting aspect of your open world. Being able to populate a, let's face it, pretty empty region with mobs like Psyduck, or Bidoof, or Krogunk, or Stunky, or Nosepass, or Hippopotamus. I mean, you can't beat that. Not every game can bring 20 years of nostalgia to the table when it comes to basic enemy design, and Sinnoh in particular has a pretty substantial and varied regional dex to work with. This game is the pure extract, boiled down, stripped away, crystallized version of the gotta catch 'em all ethos. The game does not force much engagement with its new battle system or training up your mods. Instead, it truly wants you to study and collect every Pokemon. The Pokédex doubles down on the task-oriented list that motivates the player as they move throughout the world. It's not good enough just to catch a Psyduck. Instead, you have to dig deep. Ancestry.com those motherfuckers. Find out what their dad's like, what they like to eat, what their screams sound like right before their final breath. It's fucking awesome. I mean, it sucks, for sure. Like, from an objective point of view, the tasks the Pokédex gives are super simple, repetitive, and sometimes kinda random. It's cool when a task feels really inspired by the Pokemon, like with Baniri, the little coy bitch will always run away if you normally approach with a battle. Completing this task requires stealthy battle initiation so that you get a first turn surprise. I like that. Gives character to the Pokemon and its dex completion, but unfortunately most of the time it's just the same song and dance of fighting a few, catching a few, feeding a few, or using some specific move in battle a couple times. Returning to base and getting your rank points after unloading the entire ecosystem's wildlife onto Professor Laventon is some good Pavlovian shit. Ranking up efficiently is yet another element of the checklist to Legends. All the best things about this game are the pea-brained, mouse-getting-the-cheese type feats. It's a pleasure of collection, mini sparks of dopamine around every corner when you discover a new Pokemon or strike another task from a list. Fill up a progression bar, level up your Pokemon, fill out the map, etc. You could argue a lot of video games do this, and you'd be fucking right. But man, does Legends really leverage our own psychology against us, and nothing else. I don't really have a fundamental issue with this strategy. This game is addicting and fun sometimes, precisely for how much it leans into this basic concept. Pokemon are fun to collect, and that absolutely is enough of a concept to base a game off of. Look at Pokemon Go. But man, by design, for every second this game behaves like a cacophony of jingles and list checking, its flaws become eye-searingly glaring. For every small success Legends achieves on a basic gameplay loop level, it utterly fails at almost everything else that could enrich its mechanics and depth. Like the story. As soon as I pressed start, this game's story had me tilted. So apparently some teen from our world got isekai'd by Truck-kun when he was playing Pokemon Go in the streets. But luckily, Arceus is a benevolent god who let him keep not only his life, but also his iPhone as he was thrown through the dimensional rift. I guess you could say this light novel plot is really phoned in. We wake up on the shore, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon style, to Professor Laventon and his 3 runaway Pokemon. Since baseball hasn't been invented yet, everyone throws like pansies, meaning the entire Galactic Expedition team is as effective at catching Pokemon as I was at the age of 4. So the MC's latent ball-chucking abilities quickly makes him the go-to guy or gal for every major or micro problem possible in Jubilite Village. Upon arriving in said village, the game attempts to establish an outsider narrative, where the player character is discriminated against due to their foreign origins. This is almost almost immediately resolved and rendered moot, but I'll get to that later. Ideally, by helping the village, you go on a journey of trust building that integrates you and Pokemon to this backwater village. Captain Silene proposes
child labor as a proper arrangement.
And well, off you go to trek through mountains of lame dialogue for an hour or so before you actually get to play the game. Look, the story sucks, that's nothing new for this series, but especially in Legends, everything is so low energy, low stakes, with a shockingly low investment in its own premise. In this game, we're provided three main themes as I see it. Pokemon are terrifying, vulnerable teen must navigate a harsh, discriminatory environment to survive, and precarious multidimensional rifts threaten the stability of the natural order. Those three main themes rarely demand any serious attention, nor provide any narrative tension. The plot just drones on and on, one unending dialogue interaction after the next, backed by this short loop of sleepy conversation filler music. Which, speaking of music, all the Diamond and Pearl tracks are still heaters. Whenever they break out some Sinnoh love on the soundtrack, I actually feel some tangible nostalgia that I thought this game was attempting to sell back to me. So much of this game, visually, sonically, and especially narratively, is vague, unremarkable filler that I rarely felt that cynical nostalgia bait I thought I was succumbing to when I first bought the game. When I reached a turn of forest in Obsidian Fieldlands, nothing visually reminded me of the forest, other than it being a forest, obviously. It was only thanks to the great music that I was able to catch on. I can't tell you how many times I said to myself, well, at least it's Sinnoh leading up to the game's release, but like, no, it's barely Sinnoh. Look at Professor Laventon's beanie. Shit can't be that old, and yet there's nothing here. A whole region of nothing. We meet these Diamond and Pearl clans, but they don't get a town. We only meet like 2 of them, maybe a few TPs here and there, but there's really nothing else to it. RPGs need towns and characters. You gotta make the game world feel real through a variety of countries and people. All I'm saying is they could have at least stolen some more of this stuff from Diamond and Pearl like they did the music. Funnily enough, Jubilite Village's main side quests provide more engaging story content than the main quest. I like Jubilite Village well enough. It's nice to see how each side quest works as a playful look into how humans and Pokemon began to commingle. The village and all its inhabitants are scared shitless by Pokemon at the beginning. As I said, Pokemon are big, scary motherfuckers. The village is segregated apart from the rest of the world. As the player continues to prove that a partnership with Pokemon is possible, the villagers begin to grow curious. First, they ask if you can show them one, and as you complete more side quests, Pokemon will start to move in, the village starts to grow, and the people start to embrace being a part of a broader ecosystem that includes Pokemon and foreigners. The music grows too. The boring beginning music I complained about earlier begins to expand, filling out into a lovely rendition of the Jubilife City theme from Diamond and Pearl, getting more complex as the city populates with Pokemon brought in through your many adventures. These side quests are sweet and simple endeavors, like a filler episode of the anime, but they deliver on the main premise of the game's historical backdrop. Fun first encounters between people and Pokemon. The main story gets so obsessed with the multiversal, dimensional rift lightning shenanigans that it totally distracts itself from the genuinely interesting initial marketing premise of Legends Arceus. I'm not sure why there had to be isekai, time travel, wormhole shit in the game at all. If the game needs a smartphone merely to motivate UI decisions, then I don't know, Chief, but I'm willing to suspend my disbelief for a menu. I love that the game positions trust as a central thematic friction. Should people trust Pokemon? Should Pokemon trust people? Should the village trust this outsider? Should the clans trust each other? Should I trust Game Freak with another $60? And it's you at the center of things, building trust and connecting people and Pokemon together, building a bridge across America. Wait, wrong game. When they do make the efforts to let this stuff sink in, it feels good to walk around town after so much positive change has taken place. I've spent a lot of time talking about being able to explore an open world, freely catching Pokemon and gathering materials and legends, but to be honest, the exploration itself really sucks. The story rewards mentioned previously are meaningless or even detrimental to progress through areas. More often than not, the Pokemon are what make traversal rewarding. And so if you enter a brand new area and it's just a bunch of fucking Paris again, I immediately feel scammed. You're really gonna waste a whole new area on yet another Paris spawn? The sense of discovery evaporates. The details of the world are lacking in any sense of interesting environmental storytelling, world building, or visual splendor. There's a lot of elementary elements that feel really half-baked, like in the Crimson Mirelands. Attempts are made with this area, like this fireplace. Walking through this bit, noticing that yet again Paris has staked another claim to this world, I didn't immediately say, fuck it, I'm out, because I was vaguely intrigued by this fire pit. It may sound trivial, but after 12 hours of nothing but trees, rocks, and rivers, seeing something remotely man-made was an oasis in a desert of dirt. I explored nearby to see if there was more to this story, but no, just a fireplace. And then later, when it's revealed to be just a shitty Misfortune Sisters encounter, even the Salacion ruins nearby, a main story area required to advance the campaign, is a single empty square room. It's just kind of depressing, man. It's inexcusable how little meaningful detail there is in Hisui since it's literally Sinnoh. There's a shared basis of familiarity already baked in. It's not just a missed opportunity that Legends doesn't capitalize more on Sinnoh nostalgia like I mentioned earlier, but it's just fucking bad world design that exploration in and of itself is so rarely rewarded outside of finding new Pokemon. Landmarks are always indistinct blurry blobs. Yeah, sometimes there are encampments with tents and huts and a random group of people, but not only are these areas quite small, but Minecraft villagers have more to say to you than these chumps. The lack of meaningful engagement with a believable lived-in world makes the whole experience feel like it's solely an exercise in menial labor. Like I said, that menial labor is addictive, but the second a new area reuses Pokemon from earlier, it sucks, it's lame, I'm sad. From a level design perspective too, exploration is pretty rudimentary. There are no real puzzles or platforming, no friction to exploring that requires your brain. And again, that means nothing gets in the way of the initial loop of walking and ball chucking, which is something I praised earlier. But after enough hours, that one-dimensional gameplay starts to wear out its welcome. However, I've waited this long, and I think I've been pretty fair so far too. So, with that said, it's finally time to talk about the This game has gotten a lot of flack for its graphical fidelity. I ain't no crazy stickler for graphics. I mean, I'll fuck with jump and flash. If the game is good, I'll overlook a lot of things, but I can't overlook this. 10 out of 10 times, these environments look like absolute dog shit. The textures are dull, repetitive, and unbelievably blurry. The geometry is alias to shit, and the pop-in is audaciously bad. The models are okay. For some reason, the skybox looks 8K in comparison to the rest of the world, and the aesthetic up close tries its best to scab over lack of detail with an impressionistic style. But the overwhelming majority of the game looking like this makes these somewhat nice visual elements an even more jarring experience rather than a pleasant reprieve from the bog shit. If you're able to ignore the visual disaster that is Legends, it's because the frame rate of the player character is stable enough to make the gameplay feel as smooth as 30 FPS ever could. But the pop-in totally disrupts these meager successes in frame rate, especially when you unlock mounts and start moving quickly through the world. All these issues get exponentially worse. The game, to its credit, does support dynamic weather and time of day, but these weather effects generically apply the same texture to every model, so Onyx starts looking like Play-Doh when it rains. This is a bad looking Switch game, and that's saying something. The graphics are truly the major reason why exploration sucks so hard in this game. Many times these open world games leverage visual splendor and sightseeing vistas to give value to the player's exploration. What is both absolutely infuriating and hilarious about Legends is, for how ugly it is, the game was marketed and designed around that framing. All the familiar open world trailer cuts found its way into Legends' own cutscenes, and when taken at face value, it's a fucking joke. You cannot do the over-the-shoulder push zoom on top of a hill with this game. It doesn't work the way you want it to, Pokemon Company. If anyone's taken a screenshot of a vista in Pokemon Legends Arceus, it's to laugh at on Twitter, nothing more. Oh shit, that's right, I almost forgot. So yeah, despite everything, this game is still a turn-based JRPG. Legends Arceus sports a streamlined, simplified version of Pokemon's classic battle system. Gone are abilities and held items, stat modifying has been greatly simplified, and the total overall move pool has been heavily reduced. What is new in Legends are agile style and strong style modifiers that can be applied to your moves. Choosing one of these styles will adjust both the selected move's strength and the battle order. This slight tweak provides some interesting trade-offs that can greatly speed up the many necessary battles needed to complete the many checklists found in the Pokédex. During battles, you're free to roam around the arena, but aside from manually running away or getting the best action shot, there isn't anything else you can do. The Pokémon still perform the actions in battle, and in one-on-one scenarios, it's no different than how encounters went down in the old games. It is possible to get stuck in a disadvantageous situation where you're outnumbered against 2 or 3 opponents, although this happens mostly in dimensional rifts, where lots of tough, exclusive Pokémon spawn and aggro you relentlessly. While a few trainers provide a similar level of difficulty, a vast majority of the required fights in this game are borderline interactive cutscenes. A single alpha Pokemon will run laps around any trainer you come up against. There is one fight that's some BS, but I'll save that for later. I love how you can freely swap out the moves for your Pokemon on the fly, and how easy you can learn brand new moves at the dojo in Jubilife. Because of these strides in move pool accessibility, the viability of the Pokemon you catch in the wild greatly increases. Evolution, especially through means other than direct level up, have also been streamlined. Having an item that can stand in for a trade evolution like the link cable needs to become a permanent dominant fixture for the series. However, I find it funny how all these wonderful improvements to having a wider pool of good, usable Pokemon stems from the game in which battling is a complete non-factor. Shockingly, aside from trading, there is no multiplayer mode that lets you battle with your friends or online. So unless you pay for Pokemon Home, all these hundreds of Pokemon you collect will remain in your pasture forever unused. Also, there are so few required trainer battles to begin with. Most of the mainline missions simply require you to just show up to a location that's marked on the map, mash through some first grade dialogue, maybe fight a Pokemon or two, lather, rinse, repeat. There's one moment I like when you're tasked with catching a Dusclops, which spawn at night near an abandoned shipwreck, one of the only cool, true landmarks in the game. It actively makes you engage with the one part of Legends that's actually fun, exploring and catching Pokemon, but contextualizing it with some attempts at environmental storytelling and cultural history. After a few missions, you'll be able to battle each area's Frenzied Lord Pokemon, bosses which can only be defeated by endlessly pelting them with Axe Body Spray. These boss fights are the prime example of how boring real-time combat in Legends can be. I could deep dive into how mechanically borked this whole combat system is, but why even bother? There's only 7 of these bosses in the game, and if you die, you can just continue the boss fight right where you left off, HP and all, since even Game Freak knew these fights were shit. The first 70% of the game focuses on you going from region to region, quelling each of the 5 Frenzied Lords of Hisui. Once you finally dealt with that last lord, it seems that the game is heading towards its conclusion, so spoilers for the end game, not that there's really anything to spoil. There's a lot of dialogue that stresses how important you've been in resolving conflict and bringing peace to the land once defeating that 5th lord. I mean, they really lay it on thick how instrumental you've been for progress between people and Pokemon and whatnot. Your return to Jubilife Village is almost like a victory lap where the praise just flows in from everyone. Commander Kamado, clearly feeling a bit insecure that some 12-year-old is just freeballing his way to a Nobel Peace Prize, decides to turn the plot on its head. The next morning, Jubilife Village wakes up to find the sky turned red, and Kamado immediately accuses your foreign boy out of nowhere. Even the side characters are like,
hey Commander, that literally makes no sense. There's no way to pin the sky-going communist on some kid.
It's a completely out of nowhere plot point, but nevertheless we're banished from the village and are shamefully escorted out. It's funny how thick the game laid on the praise right before this immediate change of heart. I will credit the story for doing something that narratively twists the plot in a different direction. Finally, Legends Arceus somewhat awkwardly provides urgency, tension, and conflict that the player can't immediately overcome through their talent of playing this easy-ass game. Mysterious nomad Volo invites your banished self to his local cougar, Cognita. Cognita lives alone in a fancy tent somewhere in another loading zone. She tasks you with a pilgrimage to Mesprit, Uxie, and Azelf at the 3 Lakes of Hisui. They look deep into the bottom of your soul, vibe check you with some weird 4th grade math questions, and give you their plumage. Oh, okay. Completing the Red Chain gives us the ability to climb Spear Pillar, and to this game's credit, the grandeur of this place still hits after all these years. One of the few moments where the Sinnoh setting definitely delivers. However, Kamado's Renaissance Fair cosplay bluntly interrupts this climactic moment. It's just so cringe how forced this whole conflict is. I mean, he straight up gets called the fool in-game and responds, perhaps. He is one of the rare trainer battles, though, that has more than 3 Pokemon in his party. I really wish there were more of these trainer fights that actually posed a slight threat, but by this point in the game, your team's full of level 70 plus alphas you caught on your way up the mountain. Anyway, after a quick case of the fuck around and find outs, we climb all the way up to the top of Spear Pillar and catch Dialga, or Palkia if you're a simp. Immediately after taking one out, the other will grace our presence for another boss fight. Oh, wait, what? We're going back? Gotta get that origin ore, I suppose. What was that all about? All we did was leave, get the ore, and come right back. Goofiest padding ever. Anyways, one more set of legendary cheeks clapped later, and the day is unceremoniously saved.
Sayonara, Shadow the Hedgehog.
But I'm not done yet.
In Pokemon Legends Arceus, there's an inverse correlation between the amount of game you've played and the amount of fun you're having. While seeing the credits is nice and all, we know from the box art that the real ending has got to involve the big man himself, which requires you to catch every Pokemon. As you inch ever closer to 100% completion, the joy of discovering new Pokemon naturally evaporates almost entirely, as you have to obnoxiously wait around base camp in hopes of spawning distortion zones for their exclusive Pokemon, or having to prowl around the map in the dead of night looking for the last missing Spiritomb Wisp, even though I swear I checked the guide 3 separate times, or spending over an hour and a half trying to get Cherubi to spawn. I've never had more mental anguish in my life over a forgettable stage 1 grass type Pokemon than trying to spawn Cherubi, and apparently I'm not alone in this. The remaining legendary Pokemon don't make up for it either, and that's a massive shame considering Legends genre change really could have lent itself to bringing some real pomp and circumstance back to legendary Pokemon. Yet lo and behold, these missions play no differently than the single-digit subquest all the way back at the start of the game. Catching Darkrai is no meaningfully different than catching fucking shinks. Get the mission, go to place, catch the Mon. End of story. I remember just getting to Heat Train and Platinum had you go through a whole dungeon in Stark Mountain, teaming up with your good pal Buck for some double battles, all before concluding the epilogue of the Team Galactic and Looker storylines. And then you get to battle Heat Train, and look, his catch rate isn't 90%. You do all this monotonous legendary catching to get the remaining Arceus-type plate things. After acquiring the remaining post-game plates, you're able to engage in a pseudo-champion fight with what's revealed to be this game's gender-bent Cynthia, Volo. Volo's true self challenges you to what I deem to be one of the most uncalled-for difficulty spikes in any Pokemon game. Up until this point, every single trainer fight, all 8 of them, have required push-to-talk level brain power to defeat. And now Game Freak decides to flippantly throw a 6v8 boss fight against you with Cynthia's main team in multiple Garantina forms? Now, did I beat this on the first try? Of course I did, but I had 6 all-caps alpha Pokemon in my party to do it with, and I still had to use multiple max revives. You better be balling with 6 OUs or higher, or else you simply don't stand a chance. I know I complained earlier about how easy as shit Legends has been, but this difficulty spike feels like it's ripped from a totally different game. Difficulty is something to build up to and prepare the player for, which is something I also felt was lacking in the Elite Four of BDSP. I started sweating bullets when Flint's Drifblim suddenly baton passed minimized to his fucking Infernape. I mean, are you kidding me? To be honest, Pokemon has always utterly failed at teaching players its deeper mechanics in-game through a well-constructed difficulty curve in meaningfully challenging trainer battles. All the player is really trusted to rely on is whether their level is bigger than the opponent's, but Legends is easily the worst defender in the series, as the battle system is so irrelevant to the game that it's just unreasonable to expect any player to meaningfully engage with these systems within the story mode. Even if you have game knowledge from prior entries in the series, all those in-depth mechanics that can help even out level disparities with creative solutions have been removed thanks to the simplified battle system. Also, not a game that's particularly easy to grind levels in since there's no trainer fights, so yeah, it's no bueno to throw one of the most opponent-favored matchups in series history at the player. Anyway, with Volo defeated, all that's left to do is complete the Pokedex, and boy have I saved the most frustrating encounters for last. The absolute worst Pokemon in the game to catch are the Weather Trio, or I guess Quartet in this game. Every single limitation with the real-time overworld mechanics in Legends comes to the forefront during these encounters, where the hardest part of catching them is initiating the fucking battle. The Weather Gang just straight up ignores or blocks any mud or snowballs you throw, they dart away like the goddamn Roadrunner, and they shoot homing tornado projectiles that'll have you on your ass and sent back to camp after only 2 to 3 hits. It really feels like the action part of Legends completely collapses under the weight of any situation more dynamic than the simple sneak and toss. My only strategy was to kamikaze them from the back of Braviary in hopes of locking into battle, but that was far from consistent. But eventually, after many trials and tribulations, you will indeed catch them all, and finally be able to confront Arceus above the skies of Spear Pillar. While the Weather Gang pushed the overworld mechanics a bit too far, Arceus takes the boss fight mechanics of Legends and drop kicks them off the highway. His primary form of attack is a circular expanding Beam of Death, my 8th favorite Pokemon move. This Mario-esque style of attack would be trivial to dodge in just about any other game, but in Legends it's an obnoxious nightmare, and that's only because you can't dodge diagonally. Couple that with Legends' horrendous lock-on, and you have a final boss that leaves you more frustrated than fulfilled. And with one last kick in the nuts, when your big final encounter with Arceus is all said and done, you're plopped right back on the top of Spear Pillar with no credits rerun, certificate of Dex completion, or any other type of pat on the back or acknowledgement for finishing the true objective of the game. My insides were overcome with emptiness. Playing Legends Arceus has led me to truly reevaluate my relationship with Pokemon. I've loved this series for a long time and consider myself pretty knowledgeable with the ins and outs of the franchise. Obviously, a well-honed nostalgia for Pokemon is not a unique thing on the internet. Pokemon is so massive that there's plenty of passion and expertise for every facet of its design, history, and influences to go around. Pokemon has enough fans, both totally smitten or totally jaded, to pick apart every little detail of every major release till Kingdom Come. As the franchise's annualization ratchets up in intensity like never before, my bones quake at the thought of closely tracking such a series that continually disappoints me specifically every time. I'm into Pokemon mainly for that niche appeal of old school JRPG role-playing, the stiff but fair challenge that its systems inspire in ROM hacks and the like, and an immersive world that feels big and real and lived in and has something to say. With so many players, Pokemon has to balance devoting resources to its many other various pillars, like competitive multiplayer. What popular role-playing game has to juggle being a single-player RPG, all while maintaining a massive and annually shifting online competitive scene? This couldn't have been the intention starting out, and clearly Game Freak has adapted adapted. Pokemon has no incentive to partake in some major self-reflection on its game design. The fact that it's still printing money is one reason, but also because Pokemon, as it is today, is the product of a major shift in direction. Gen 5 really invested into the single-player JRPG aspects of the series, going back to the pure Edenic appeal of the original games and expanding on them, but its online notoriously suffered. Gen 5's disappointing sales and lack of growth incentivized X and Y's reinvestment into competitive Pokemon, crystallized in the Mega Evolution mechanic. They allotted more resources to these modes, and consequently streamlined the main story around multiplayer-focused mechanics like Mega Evos, Z-Moves, Dynamax, and now you gotta be fucking kidding me.
Terrastalize.
They also simplified world building by sticking to linear paths and making use of a bunch of foreign Epcot cliches in region design. Lastly, they continually force new quality-of-life mechanics that remove the frustrating RPG hurdles that require smart team building and exploration to overcome. Obviously, this worked, and the franchise has seen the most growth since the heyday of Pokemania. I liken this evolution of Pokemon to EA's Madden series. Yeah, a little out of bounds at first blush, but hear me out. It's easy to make this comparison flippantly and joke about Pokemon being Nintendo's Madden, an annualized, barely changing franchise that cynically leverages a global appealing brand that they alone control to print money hand over fist. But it goes deeper than that. It's well documented that Madden 2 has abandoned the niche single-player RPG sim appeal of franchise mode, where you can take control of one team and roleplay as them for several years, building a roster and competing to be the very best like no one ever was. For the Madden heads in the audience, I see you nodding along. Like Pokemon, Madden contains a gigantic and ever-growing roster of nearly 1,000 unique playable characters to collect and build teams with. Pokemon and Madden both monopolize timeless strategic turn-based systems that you simply cannot get anywhere else in video games. But in recent years, Madden has allotted less and less resources to this less monetizable single-player mode, as the series' largest growth comes primarily from its online competitive modes like Ultimate Team. Like, holy fuck, Madden ranks in billions of dollars from this mode alone. Unsurprisingly, there's a sizable disgruntled fanbase that complains about the new Madden year over year like clockwork. Besides lambasting the newest games for being dog shit, these fans also look back at older games like NFL 2K5 or PS2 era Madden when the football sim was more invested in the single-player RPG mode and features. Still, they're forced to engage in these new games if they want a taste of that exquisite set of core mechanics, as EA holds the exclusive rights to the NFL simulation license. I hope these similarities are as obvious to you as they are to me. That's how it feels to be a Pokemon fan in my position. I know that as much as I like to think Sword and Shield blow, some kids today will be online 20 years from now talking about how Gen 8's their favorite generation, bemoaning Gen 24's lack of content. It's a cycle I understand, but one I no longer wish to participate in anymore. All this to say, Pokemon Legends doesn't even have multiplayer, so what the fuck? What did I even play? This game has the starved single-player experience without any of the other modes. I know I said that Legends provided me with some faint whiff of a hope that Pokemon could turn the ship around, but this ship's a prototype. Legends is literally an alpha Pokemon. I don't care what web Game Freak spins. This ain't no mainline game. This shit's a spin-off with only a hint of that true Pokemon flavor. It's Pokemon LaCroix. The open world design hurts more than it helps, mainly with replayability, one of Pokemon's key appeals that set it apart from nearly every other JRPG. There are some aspects that I found fun, but it's not the timeless and enduring fun I look for in the series. When Pokemon's scale gets larger and larger, the regions themselves feel smaller and smaller. Hisui feels microscopic in comparison to classic Sinnoh. To do an open world scale justice would require a Witcher 3 level of investment to get right, and I think I'll wait for hell to freeze over before I start to anticipate that. I can't even fathom replaying Legends Arceus. I've seen all it has to offer in one go, which really isn't that much, and that's a bummer. I know someone has already posted in the comment that of course Pokemon feels like it's made for kindergartners, because it's just a kid's game. I hate this argument, because like all you're saying is kids are stupid and don't deserve well-made art. But yeah, I guess I agree now, because it seems like the only place for older fans in the series is multiplayer, as the main story is continually stripped away of its value and complexity. By the way, the person who least needs to hear someone complain about Pokemon on the internet again is me. I've heard it all, I've seen it all, I've felt it all. This video has been in the pipeline for so goddamn long, I don't even care how good or bad Pokemon Legends Arceus actually is, because this game helped me move on. That was just a character you heard earlier, this entire time. Simply a facade made to entertain you. If BDSP was my Joker moment, this right here is my Bennett Foddy moment. I'm getting over it. Legends Arceus helped me truly accept that modern Pokemon is not for me, and as long as Pokemon keeps being made for investors and not for players, it'll keep being not for me. Yet as long as Pokemon releases on the Nintendo Switch, the next game will always be the new best-selling entry or fastest-selling entry as new fans pour in from all sides, so I don't see an end in sight. I have no intention of being a PokeTuber. Please do not think of me as a PokeTuber. I'm begging you, call this my swan song. I'll let other creators keep doing God's work of smartly critiquing the series, so don't expect anything on Turnstyle about these fuckers. Anyways, I'm gonna go back to talking about games that are sick, cool, and based, like Virtua Tennis on Dreamcast, where I belong. And if that sounds good to you, then I think you should Hey, thank you so much for watching our super long-ass review of Pokemon Legends Arceus. This took probably over like 75 hours to put together, and we're both really proud of it. So thank you so much for sitting through the whole thing. If you like this video and want to see more like it, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, as well as leave a comment to appease the YouTube elder gods, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.